Alrighty, we are live on YouTube and we're live on Twitch as well. I'm going to jump into this plant-based news video about Beyond Meat. Let's do a little bit of Fast Action Network first. And I'm not sure if my chat is working again now. Maybe someone can do a little test message. Let's take a look. Yeah, someone drop something in the chat so I can see if it's working. See a couple of people here now. We're going to do a little bit of Fast Action Network to start. I'll watch that plant-based news video about Beyond Meat that we didn't watch yesterday. Okay, I guess we only had one more action added on here since yesterday. Let me see if that's coming through my OBS. Oh yeah, okay, seems to be working. Good, good, good. Well, that was that. Let's see if anything's kicking off on. I haven't looked at LinkedIn today. See if we've got anything juicy going on here. Effective charities, nice, based. What's this telling us about? I don't think it's an animal thing. Found the top 5 charities globally compared to those in the UK was the difference was 130x. So this is more like a global health thing, I think. We averaged these compared to the top charity we had, the difference was over 3000x. Yeah, so I don't think this is looking at animal things in particular, but yeah, there's an example of the difference in charity effectiveness. We were talking about this a little bit yesterday. How the most effective charities can be literally thousands of times more effective than average charities. It's easy for charities to not actually get a lot done, honestly. Robbie Lockie sharing some stuff from foodfacts.org. Oh, brother. Here's Ty Beale. Hey, Jake, how's it going? Nice to see you. Oh, this is a cultivated meat thing. Nice. All right, let's take a look at the plant-based news video, and we'll see if I'll have a little look for what else we can look at here. Let's take a look at this.
This week we're going to be talking about Beyond Meat because their share price has tanked more than 99% from its July 2019 peak of $240, now under $1. But recently, Beyond Meat founder Ethan Brown has hit back at critics. Let's see what he's had to say.
Around 2019, a group of industry representatives, and I refer to them as the Merchants of Doubt, which is a reference to a book that was written on that subject when they were doing this around tobacco and climate change. The Merchants of Doubt got money together, and they started to fund campaigns against our industry and against Beyond Meat. So every time we'd have a quarterly call with investors, they would publish something in the paper, they'd run TV ads, they would do big social media campaigns, and they were brilliant. They were smarter than us. They beat us. They said, fake meat, real chemicals. They said this food is ultra processed. And those that didn't want to make a change didn't make a change. But what was so dangerous, King says every society will have its protectors of the status quo. But he also says, and the fraternities of the indifferent. And it's the fraternities of the indifferent that we found so frustrating. Because here we were building beautifully clean products that took protein right from the farmer's field. And instead of running it through factory farms and through animals to the plate, we ran it directly from the field. And we separated the protein from the fiber, and we put that protein through heating, cooling, and pressure, and we landed that protein right on the center of the plate. Clean, efficient process. But it became demonized. And we knew that the people that didn't want to make the change would accept that argument. What we didn't know is that the enlightened omnivore would also accept that argument. That the progressives would also accept that argument. And they'd say, you know what, that food's processed, I don't want it.
Great speaker, Ethan Brown. I love him. He's becoming like an advocate nowadays.
It's such a difficult one because, like he said, they actually made a product that is a clean product, but people who are just going to see it as processed anyway will always see it as processed, and they'll just use that as an excuse. And I think it's a really difficult position for vegan food products to be in. We've spoken about it before. We've said, like, as soon as the ultra processed argument came to the front, then people were like, veganism is bad. If you're vegan, you're eating processed food. And that's just not true. Kind of like what he was trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, the key point is that even if you are eating processed food, that doesn't mean that it's unhealthy. And as I've said many times, and will continue to say, plant-based meat's healthier than meat. Right? One of those things that bears repeating. Certainly the propaganda on the other side has been repeated enough. I do wonder how much the ultra-processed thing has been responsible for decline in plant-based sales. Because there was a few different factors going on concurrently. Certainly the ultra-processed discourse was one of them. But also sort of post-COVID cost of living increases, I think, is probably an underrated factor here, where suddenly everything was more expensive, and then you have plant-based meat, which still tends to have a price premium over meat products on average. And so perhaps people are cutting back for that reason. There was also just the change in pace of everything before and after COVID. I think COVID gave a sense of everything's a bit unusual now, and then after COVID, there's sort of a sense of everything's back to normal now. So as the ultra-processed discourse, there was the price pressure from post-COVID inflation, and then there was kind of the shaking of normality and then the shaking back again. But yeah, I mean, no doubt the ultra-processed thing's been a part of it. What did Jake? Oh, the share price? Yes, that's right. There was a short squeeze, wasn't there? Where the Beyond Meat stock price did rally. Let's have a little look, actually. Right, yeah, there was this period where it went 7x in a few days. But then it's continued this downward trajectory. And it's now under $1 a share. Oh, those are the days. Look at that. It IPO'd at $67. Peaked at $234. And then really after 2021 is when it starts going steadily down. Throughout 21 and yeah, into 2022, and it's kind of been flatlined since then. But yeah, there was the short squeeze. We looked the other day at the Beyond Meat drinks, which I kind of think is, I think that's an underrated idea in most quarters. A lot of people don't seem to like that, but I don't mind it. I don't mind it.
They've conflated the two together, and that makes us have a really difficult position to sort of fight against.
Yeah, I absolutely
Hey, Tristan, good to see you. Welcome, welcome.
agree. I mean, I believe Ethan Brown is really fighting against a cognitive bias known as what we call the naturalistic fallacy. The belief that anything natural, like beef, is inherently good, and anything artificial or processed, like plant-based meat, is inherently bad. And when we really look at this is heuristic. It's where we come to a solution by rules that are only really loosely defined. It's scientifically flawed. For example, like arsenic is natural. It's not good for you. That naturalistic fallacy shouldn't be something that we fall upon.
So check this out.
Yeah, she's nailed it. That is exactly what's going on here. This is another one of those things where I feel if you were already aware of this, I'd come across naturalistic fallacy, I don't know how, but many years before, and it seemed intuitive to me straight away, like, why would we think that processed foods are necessarily unhealthy? This is naturalistic fallacy. It's like if you have that idea already in your head, you can spot it very easily when it happens, but yeah, most people fall for it pretty easily. And of course, it's not helped by all of the misleading headlines and studies. We're looking yesterday at that bloke who posted the study saying ultra-processed foods, brackets like fake meat, are unhealthy. So there's also, of course, like deliberately misleading framing from pro-meat people. And then further accidentally misleading framing by ill-informed people, I'll say. Oh, nice, Jake. You've made some money on it, huh? Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a volatile one. Certainly a few months ago. I guess it's pretty steady now, but yeah, it's. I don't know what to say about that. You know, there's the vegan ETF. You seen that, Jake? I think it's literally just the vegan climate ETF. Yeah, I think it's literally just the S&P, but with the non-vegan companies taken out of it. So it just follows, or maybe the Nasdaq, I'm not sure. Just follows the stock market and then has, yeah, non-vegan companies taken out. We have similar things for like ethical funds where they don't invest in weapons and tobacco manufacturers are common things. But yeah, this is the vegan ETF by Beyond Investing. Seems pretty based. Sorry to hear that, vegan stoner.
I was paid to discredit veganism online. For a year, I worked for a meat industry trade group. I won't say which one, but they're US based. My job was to go onto sites like this, which is Reddit, and discredit.
Oh yeah, we saw this. This is the meat industry lobbyist AMA. This is what I was speculating about the vegan subreddit the other day. Well, it's what caused me to speculate. There has been known lobbyist accounts in there. And I'm not sure exactly what has happened with that, because I'm pretty sure the number of people in the vegan subreddit has gone way down. So maybe there was a whole anti-bot campaign on Reddit, I'm not sure. It seems like there was a lot of accounts kicked out of there, which maybe was a good thing.
Veganism. We'd make multiple accounts and pretend to be vegans with bad health outcomes. Wow. Again, it's just on the screen. You can read it, you can pause it and read it all. But I think this is very telling. And finally, we've got something to point to. Like there have been a lot of reports that have come out saying there are these influencers that are paid. There's this kind of propaganda and this misinformation being spread. But now this is kind of more tangible evidence, isn't it?
It is. And we have to remember the power of
True, Tristan. Thank you for the reminder. Drop a like on the stream if you didn't already. I appreciate that.
anecdotal evidence, the power of the story. And I think that's what a lot of research or empirical evidence fails to do so well. We love to hear from the horse's mouth. We love to hear what worked for someone. And it's easy for us to associate, relate to that person versus a research paper or the literature in itself.
Yeah, this is what Nick Cooney was saying in the talk we watched yesterday. The stories are much more powerful than the statistics. If you have, I knew one person who was vegan and then they were unhealthy, obviously that's not good evidence or any basis that you should be making decisions on. But for the average person, that's more compelling than saying epidemiological evidence suggests that vegans have better health outcomes in large cohorts over long periods of time. Right? The stories are much more powerful than the statistics, which is kind of a shame, but also once you know that, you can use that, right? I think that some compelling stories, we need to come up with and spread some compelling stories on our side. Because the evidence is on our side, but people are not that interested in the evidence and the statistics. So, anecdotes is where it's at in terms of persuading the average person. A guy in my gym said that they knew someone doing the carnivore diet, and because they weren't getting enough fiber, they had some sort of gut rot from, they were just eating meat and they weren't going to the toilet enough, basically, and there was some meat in them that went moldy over time. Who knows how common that is, statistically? Who knows if actual health nutrition evidence would back up something like that as being a common phenomenon? But I remember the story, right? So yeah, at the individual level, people tend to find stories much more compelling than statistics, and that's why this kind of Reddit jacking does work, even if there's no actual evidence behind the claims that are being made. If you can come up with a kind of graphic story that people are going to remember, that'll stick in the mind.
It's powerful, even if it's a falsity.
So we started to fight back. We started to create products that we thought would be.
Yeah, I've heard that, Jake. That's kind of that kind of sucks. I'm not sure exactly how to think about that, honestly. I guess it's another revenue stream for them. Is not what we would want them to be involved in, right? Talking about the feeding Oatly byproducts to pigs and so on. Not ideal.
Unassailable.
Nice, Jake. I have to check that out.
The challenge is this narrative, this negative narrative, has a very long tail. And it has folks that are willing to keep spending to make sure that people believe it. But here's the truth. The system we're going up against is also challenged. So I work with meat providers in Europe, and I say, why are beef prices going up so much in Europe? Got the foot and mouth disease. Why are they going up so much here in the United States? They have drought. This system that we're going up against is held together by duct tape, antibiotic, and subsidies. We just have to survive and advance. And if we do that, we will prevail.
And I think, Ethan.
Yeah, that's pretty that's pretty hopium, hey? That's a nice thought. And yes, the prices of animal products have been going up massively. I did a video about this called Plant-Based Meats Getting Cheaper and Factory Farms Are Terrified, where we looked at the various reports that have looked at the change in the price of animal products compared to plant-based products. Even if the price of plant-based products goes up somewhat, it's never keeping up with the price increases for animal products. We find the graphs that I made about that and show you some more. But this is really good to know that this is how the head of Beyond Meat's thinking about this. They can weather the storm because they know that the long term, their competition is just getting more and more expensive and less viable. Yeah, that's based, Tristan. I actually just switched from oat milk to soy milk myself. Yes, true. I did. I wrote a review of Bruce Friedrich's new book. It's very. That's actually some real good hopium. Bruce Friedrich's new book. He talks about all of this stuff, the market trajectories for meat alternatives.
then hit the nail on the head: duct tape and subsidies. He's showcasing all of the holes in the current system in a way that people can really truly relate anecdotally. The swap meet study done by Dr. Christopher Gardner at Stanford was another great support system for this segment. In this randomized crossover trial, which was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, the researchers at Stanford really compared participants who ate animal meat versus Beyond Meat for 8 weeks. And I know people are going to argue and say, well, Beyond Meat paid for this study and supported this study. I understand that. But what we found is clinical evidence supported by Stanford University. And what we saw in this swap meat study is participants who actually swapped out animal meat for plant-based meat saw a significant drop in their LDL cholesterol, right? And this metabolic marker, this key driver of heart disease. And they saw a decrease in their body weight. They saw also lower levels of TMAO, right? Trimethylene oxide, a compound which is linked to inflammation and atherosclerosis. So it gave us an opportunity, this study, to really show that there are many things.
Anyone know who this person is? She knows her shit. Yeah, we know about the swap meat study, and I like that she acknowledged and overrode the objection that it's funded by Beyond Meat. Like I was saying the other day, like, it's not that surprising that Beyond Meat are going to want to fund research in this area. And as you're mentioning as well, like, this is from Stanford University. There's not any amount of money that Beyond Meat could give to Stanford or to fund this research that would buy falsification of such results, right? That's not going to be how it works. Of course, studies can be funded by plant-based meat companies, studies can be funded by meat industry. That alone doesn't make it irrelevant or wrong or bad. Yeah, I was making this point the other day, but again, bears repeating. The swap meat study, it's called. You can give that a Google. That's some of the key evidence for health benefits of plant-based meat compared to meat. But actually, there's a couple of systematic reviews on that now, which is the level up from swap meat. They'll be, include swap meat and a bunch of other trials. Here, this is the price graphs that I was thinking of. This is data from UK supermarkets, where what I've done is using the Wayback Machine, gone on to supermarket pages and recorded the price of these different products over time. The mince one is the most compelling. Look, this is the price of beef mince in Tesco, which is the UK's largest supermarket. £3 per kilo back in 2021. Not that long ago. And since then, woof, it's gone way up, more than double to, what is it, $6.50 a kilo now? And in that same time, the price of plant-based mince has gone slightly down. So yeah, this is what Ethan Brown's talking about when he talks about the massive price increases for, in particular, beef products. Right, all Beyond Meat needs to do is survive, because this is very likely going to carry on. By 2030, you're looking at like over a tenner per kilo of beef, and plant-based mince probably again getting marginally cheaper in the same time. This is for chicken breast versus plant-based chicken breast. Not quite so dramatic. Still, the plant-based version is more expensive here. But again, the trend is downwards. And the trend for the price of chicken breast is upwards. This is a little more disappointing. Price of oat milk, or the one that I looked at anyway, had actually gone up quite a bit during that same time. And I think that might have even been a bigger increase than the price of dairy milk, so that was a little bit of a disappointment. Here you got plant-based burgers cheaper than beef burgers, and getting, that difference is growing, right? The beef burger's going up even more. These pork sausages versus plant-based sausages. That's one that didn't actually change that much. But yeah, mainly this effect on beef. I mean, I love this graph here. Look at that price increase of beef mince versus plant-based mince is immense.
Including a rebuttal to chemicals, right? The chemicals that these critics are talking about, like methyl cellulose, are often these benign binders derived from plants.
True, Tristan. I think that's why people are watching me. A little bit of opium. A little bit of opium. We need it. God knows.
And in contrast, when we think about beef or natural beef, it contains things like heme iron.
And my man Tristan King is driving the change, by the way. We were looking earlier. We haven't got any more actions on here, but action.thehumaneleague.org if you want to be part of driving this change. Very easy way that you can engage. And I find it quite cathartic, honestly, getting to have a go at some of these companies and some of their executives. It's quite relieving.
And new 5GC, right? Both of which critics are talking about, like methyl cellulose, are often these benign binders derived from plants. And in contrast, when we think about beef or natural beef, it contains things like heme iron and new 5GC, right? Both of which are mechanistically linked to cancer and inflammation. There are current studies that are showcasing the evidence of swapping real beef for things like Beyond.
This system will perish, and we will be successful. But we have to survive in advance to get there. We have to pull together. So if you're a plant-based eater, and you're buying in and you're posting on our site, oh, just have legumes, you're perpetuating a belief system which is false. So,
very true. Can't stress that enough. And that's another thing I see on the vegan subreddit that makes me think we've been infiltrated. When people, I mean, look, hey, if you want to eat legumes, fine, you do you, but you don't need to be doing the meat industry's work for them. The meat industry has literally invested millions of dollars to spread the myth that plant-based meat is unhealthy because it's processed. Let's not do their work for them, right? If you don't want to eat plant-based meat, that's fine. If you're doing that because you think it's unhealthy because it's processed, you're wrong. But if you're telling other people don't eat plant-based meat because it's unhealthy, it's unprocessed, you really should be getting paid by the meat industry because they are paying people to say that. So if you're saying it for free, you're a mug.
That protein doesn't have to go through a factory farm. That protein has no antibiotics, no hormones, no arsenic, no pus, no feces, no death, no fear, not a large amount of methane. If you can shrink the agricultural footprint, we can allow nature to come back. People forget this. The 60 billion bison that were here, the wolves, the prairie dogs, the cougars, the beautiful creatures that were here, the pronghorns. We can let them all come back if we shrink our agricultural footprint. And in doing that, in saving nature, we can save ourselves because we're taking carbon out of the air. We're bringing and cooling the...
Yes, Tristan, Conspiracy is very good film. I found it to be super compelling. I'm not a religious person myself. The guy I'm debating, by the way, that Matt Acton guy, he said to me, oh, I'm a Christian, so we can debate about Christian morality if you want. He says, meat and dairy are blessed foods and vegetables are not blessed. I'm like, all right, that's not going to, I'm not going to find that particularly compelling. I said, I'm not a religious person, but we can debate, morality, and you can bring that in there if you'd like to. He says, I don't debate morality with non-religious people. And we'll see about that.
The climate. This is enough, if we do it aggressively, to meet the UN requirements, to bring the temperature down, to stop this climate catastrophe. We need to get after this. We need to recruit the people that are closest in to help us do this. We can do it. And that, to me, is the most inspiring part about this. It's not between us and the government anymore, it's between us and the consumer. Let's help them make that choice to take the right type of protein, whether it's legume, whether it's plant-based meat, so that we together can take control of our destiny, of our world, of our future, and not let this negative narrative
Yeah, true. Maybe I should watch that again and revise ahead of that debate.
pervade.
What do you think about what he said early on in that clip, where he said, if you are posting on our sites, if you're posting on the Beyond Meat site saying just eat legumes, you're going against Beyond Meat and you're going with this pro-carnivore, anti-plant-based meat message. Do you agree, or are those words a bit strong?
I think the argument would be stronger if it was almost a comparative against an animal-based option. We want to emphasize for folks to eat more whole food plant-based. I don't want you to take legumes, peas, and beans off the plate. And I'm pretty sure Ethan Brown also doesn't want people to take legumes, beans, and peas off the plate, especially given that pea protein is now in the fundamental composition of Beyond Meat, right? They've taken out soy. I think the framing of that conversation was probably geared towards that particular audience at the ABA summit. So I see the point that he's making to try and elevate Beyond Meat in the market as a demand, so it doesn't lose its place. However, I think that could be detracting in the sense that it's either this or whole food plant-based. That's kind of how I interpreted that.
What did he say? If you're posting on our site, then you're going along with the narrative. It's a bit strong, but I know what you mean. He's just going with that crowd, I think.
I think he's a wealth full of knowledge. And I
mean, I think that's basically correct. Like, I do not appreciate when I see vegans talking about plant-based meat's unhealthy because it's processed. And in many cases, it is going to be this or that, right? You can only eat so much food. You're going to choose what to have for dinner. Obviously, you shouldn't never eat legumes, right? But it's perfectly fine to have plant-based meat regularly. It's healthier than meat. It's going to be a really good source of protein. It's, by the way, a very good source of protein for vegans. Like, it's going to be quite difficult to get all of your protein from legumes, realistically. Plant-based meat's really a good source of that. And we don't need to be scared of it. It's not that plant-based meat's unhealthy because it's processed. Plant-based meat's healthier than meat. You probably hear me say that about maybe 10 more times this stream, and then, dozens more times beyond that.
I think he is a mover and shaker in our industry, and we need more Ethan Brown. So I will support Ethan Brown and his company as long as it exists, unless he goes carnivore.
Yeah.
That is so true, King. Tristan, it's so true, King. Tristan King chat. I feel like vegans who trash plant-based meat are like trying to be one of the good ones, the eyes of meat eaters. Yeah, that is one of the most annoying tendencies for vegans. Like, sometimes people can get the idea that you need to be likable in order to persuade people. There's some truth in that, but if your method for being likable is trashing veganism or vegan products or other vegans, you're doing more harm than good. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I so cringe when people are like, oh, I'm not like those preachy vegans, I don't mind what anyone else does. It's like, come on, how much do you need to be liked by these maniacs? Right? Don't actually sell out what you believe. Something really powerful sometimes can just be nothing nice to say nothing. And by nice, I mean from the animal's perspective. Okay, sometimes it may not be socially convenient for you to pick a particular fight or really go after and disagree with what somebody has said, or chastise someone for eating animal products, whatever it may be. There's a time and a place, and you've got to pick your battles. But what you shouldn't do is lie about what you really think. And I've been guilty of that myself in the past, but I'm really getting good now at sometimes just saying nothing because they already know what I think. And sometimes people are looking to you as if to say, is this person going to challenge me? Are they going to give me their permission? Like, just don't sell out animals, Sometimes saying nothing and just letting it hang can be the right play.
I don't really see that happening. But I think the message in itself should be geared towards the general population and not just vegans and vegetarians. It should be towards the entire consumer base, which I'm hoping is more flexitarians and omnivores than just those who are plant-based or plant-forward.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Impossible Foods are doing. Even 5, 6, 7 years ago, they were never playing to the super uber hyper flexitarian, vegetarian, vegan audience. They've always been trying to get in there with the hardcore meat eaters. Beyond Meat tried to eschew soy when they first started, and Impossible Food uses soy as its core ingredient. And it's interesting because Impossible Foods is generating double the amount of revenue compared to Beyond Meat. So what do you think is going on there?
I think it's a
Is that true? That's crazy if so. I would have guessed that Beyond Meat's revenue is way higher than Impossible, because there's no Impossible Meat in Europe, as far as I know. Or I guess there's no Impossible Burgers. They have Impossible Chicken and stuff like that in some places. But Beyond seems to be much more everywhere where I am. Double the revenue in Impossible compared to Beyond. Who would have guessed that? And of course, Impossible Foods is not publicly listed on a stock exchange, so there's no share price to talk of.
multitude of things, right? Their marketing strategy with Impossible is geared towards decadence. It's indulgent, and everybody wants a decadent and indulgent burger. It's about how...
What's up, Andrew? Nice to see you. Nice to see you, dude. Baking plant-based cookies and checking out this live stream. Let's go.
the burger shows up. It's not about what the ingredients are. It's really marketing to the experience of eating that burger. Beyond, I believe, has really focused more on that granular ingredient focus, right? Beyond's move to pea protein, for example, was a strategic marketing decision to actually bypass the consumer's fear of soy, right? Saying that it's not a nutritional necessity. And scientifically, soy is a complete protein with the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score of 1.0. That is equivalent to that of egg and milk protein. For nutritional scientists, while people...
Yes, again true, and again a good talking point for bioavailability though, digestibility though. Let's have a look, have a graph on this. This is kind of top secret because I've made this graph for a paper that is not out yet, so no one grasped me up for sharing this. But look, here's the protein digestibility scores for different plants and animal sources. There's soy protein at the top. Then you've got milk and eggs. The maximum score here is 1. Then you've got mycoprotein, 0.99. And look at this, chicken and beef, 0.95, 0.92. Pork is not even on here, actually. I wonder where pork would come on this. That's obviously an oversight from me. But yeah, soy protein, the perfect protein digestibility score. And mycoprotein, this is corn, 0.99, so beats animal meat on protein digestibility. You might like to remember this. Now, milk and eggs, you've also got high scores here, but when you're talking about meat specifically, the protein digestibility scores for meats are lower than for soy protein and for mycoprotein. So that's a good one to have in the tank.
Pea protein is an excellent hypoallergenic source. Soy protein really has unique anti-cancer properties, right? Isoflavones. So by avoiding soy, I think Beyond Meat really avoids allergens, which is another key factor, right? Again, ingredient factor. It has that tendency to kind of miss out on that specific cancer reoccurrence benefits of soy isoflavones mentioned by many researchers and scientists within our field. I think that ingredient granularity may have actually worked against Beyond Meat in the long run.
If you're eating a burger or a hot dog, I don't think you're eating it for health reasons. So I feel like Impossible just went, a burger's a burger. It's junk food. Like, that's what it is. They didn't try to be like, yeah, but it can be healthy too. Like, here's a healthy burger. I feel like that's where Impossible kind of just stepped forward and just said it is what it is. And that's kind of helped them in the long run.
That strategic...
Yeah, that's a really good point. And this is actually something that I will often caveat. I mean, look, my favorite phrase is plant-based meat's healthier than meat. Well, when you're marketing to normies, it's often not a good idea to frame things as health products, because people are hearing not very tasty, right? If it's the low fat version, the low salt version, the low sugar version, the diet version, that's not necessarily what you want when you're choosing a lunch, right? People are actually, I've got some great slides on this showing people become less likely to choose plant-based options when they are called or explicitly framed as the healthy option. So it is true, and I feel it necessary to defend on the ultra-processed stuff by repeatedly pointing out that plant-based meat is healthier than meat. But in terms of marketing individual products, that may not necessarily be the framing that you want. There are some good stats about what's the other one on here? Protein percentage. Let me see if I can find it while I play this.
Outreach in their marketing is what deviates those two brands. Impossible seems to be marketing the experience of an indulgent, delicious burger, and that is marketed to the entire consumer base, whereas
Oh yeah, here you go. Here's the level of protein and the level of saturated fat for a few plant-based meat products compared to their meat counterparts. Redefined meat, more protein than a sirloin steak, gram for gram, and less saturated fat. Linda McCartney sausages, more protein than pork sausages, gram for gram, and less saturated fat. Meatless farm mince, more protein gram for gram than beef mince, and less saturated fat. So there's another good one. I'm going to put this in the Discord server, actually.
I think Beyond Meat really started focusing on granular ingredients to draw in the plant-based industry or consumer base, and then they responded to the non-plant-based consumer base who was arguing about the ingredients, transitioned their composition to fit the needs of a wider consumer base, and that probably didn't work for them.
How many people are plant-based? The plant-based population is smaller. So if you're in a capitalist society, if you target everyone and say, this burger's for everyone, you've got more people to sell
What's good, boss man? Good to see you.
to than just, this is just for vegans.
And that's where they went wrong, I think. That cuts to the core of the issue. I think Ethan Brown was projecting the flexitarian and plant-based market to be huge. They've got $1 billion of debt. All of their projections were like, plant-based industry is going to double, triple, quadruple, and we're going to go towards that plant-curious flexitarian audience. And maybe, just maybe, when we look back in 10, 20, 30 years, we'll say that was the wrong decision.
Who knows? But I'll tell you this from my experience in working in collegiate dining and with students, there is no vocal group more than the vegan group. So when you make a product that's for them and then
Based. Good. Good.
you pivot to market your strategies to the product that's now for others, vegans will be very vocal about that pivot and how that change feels like it's ostracizing them or not including them. And like you said, Sarah, we're a very small sliver of the market. Hear what we have to say, but maybe not gear your entire messaging and protocol and outreach based off of just one small percentage of the population, right? That's not inclusivity.
You know, you were saying about like vegans will have something to say about it if you then pivot towards the wider group. I definitely agree when I see companies adding animal products back in, because don't build your brand on the back of vegans and then suddenly turn around and say, hee hee, we're adding back in dairy now, sorry. Oh my God, we've seen it so much recently and it just frustrates me so much. I like that Impossible just kind of targeted everyone anyway. They didn't say, in order to do that, we're now going to add milk in. Like, they just stuck with what they had.
Yeah, so true. So you're saying that it's possible to own your ingredients, have soy, and say we're for everybody. In the same way, restaurants in London like Tofu Vegan are just expanding and exploding. They're saying we're quirky, we're going to put tofu in the name, we're going to put vegan in the name, but we're going to kill it and it's going to be for everybody.
Literally, and it is for everybody. I know
Tofu Vegan is based as hell, by the way. Anyone been to Tofu Vegan in London? Really, really good vegan Chinese place. And I guess there's several of them. Yeah, he's talking about it's expanding here. That's also, I didn't know this was such a phenomenon. I had a couple of my friends who taken me there, but good to know that it's a widely known thing.
many non-vegans who love it and go there all the time. So it's possible.
True, and based. I think one thing that is kind of missed here, so Andy Shovel gave us the wisdom that what matters is not how much vegan food you sell, but how much vegan food you're selling to non-vegans. And I think that was a very good point. And we heard, Good Food Institute are keen on making the point that most consumers of plant-based meat are not vegans and vegetarians, but are meat eaters. I think that is probably true, but I think as well it can be true that most of the sales are going to vegetarians and vegans because they're going to be the heaviest consumers. So you don't want to also be isolating vegetarian and vegan consumers. And then in terms of the strategy here, I mean, Ethan Brown's saying here that Beyond Meat just needs to survive because the price trajectory for their competition, being beef primarily, is going up and up and up. And so it's only a matter of time before the plant-based stuff is cheaper by default. And indeed, we've seen that in a lot of places in the UK now. So yeah, very base stuff. That was really nice to hear Ethan Brown talking. He's a very good speaker. I don't think I've heard him speaking much. There's a tempting little Ethan Brown podcast here being suggested to me. Maybe we'll have to check out more Ethan Brown stuff in the future. We've got another effective animal advocacy talk here from JC Reese, who is, I think sort of one of the founding fathers of effective animal advocacy. I think he was one of the founders of Animal Charity Evaluators. He does more AI stuff now, sentient AI and stuff like that, but he's speaking at EAGX Berkeley in 2016. Is it Berkeley? Barclay? I guess it's Barclay. Forest Green Rover's philosophy is to talk about what the product is rather than what it isn't, i.e. black bean lasagna, not meat-free lasagna. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yes, his book, The End of Animal Farming. I actually have that book, Tristan, but I'm not going to lie, I haven't read it. I should have... I think I might be in that book, But again, don't know, I haven't read it. I need to get the audiobook of that and give it a listen. I never make time to sit down and read a book, but I'll listen to them. But let's see. Here he is talking 10 years ago. Again, some of this advice is timeless, right? We watched Nick Cooney yesterday in 2013, and I thought a lot of it was very, very relevant today. So here's JC Reese, Intro to Effective Animal Advocacy. This is 25 minutes. I guess I'll watch this, and then after this, I have to shoot out. I'm doing a panel tonight at Science Fair in Swindon about food of the future, I think it's called. I think I'll try and live stream that. I'm going to take a tripod and just set up my phone and point it at the stage. I assume that the audio will be okay. I assume they'll be cool with me doing that. I'm going to ask forgiveness rather than permission on that. So I'll stream the panel later on. It's at 7:15. So in 3 hours' time, that panel is. So look out for that. And hopefully we'll get a stream of that going. Let's see what JC Reese is saying.
So using the same framework.
Oh, really, Tristan? Okay, damn, I'll definitely have to give that a go. That book actually convinced me that animal farming will end. Yeah, okay, that's going to be some good hopium. True, Andrew, we love Swindon. We love Swindon, and we love Swindon.
Framework that Ajaya introduced in the introductory talk. I call it scale instead of importance, just because I think importance can also refer to the outcome of the whole framework. And I think scale is a little clearer, but they mean the same thing. To tackle that one first, so the latest figures are something like 77 billion land-dwelling farmed animals raised and slaughtered every year globally, which is just, huge numbers. It's like 11 for every human on Earth. They're not treated very well at all. So this is an example of gestation crates, which are tiny enclosures for pregnant pigs, so small that they can't even turn around, can barely move forward and back a little. And this is how most of them are raised these days in modern animal agriculture. So it's quite an unfortunate situation. I won't go into too many details on all the issues, because I expect most of you are familiar with that, and it's sad to rehash those. But historian Yuval Noah Harari, who was the author of the book *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*, called it the worst crime in history. Even compared to all the things that humans have done to other people. So very tragic. Many people have talked about it as as being part of the top of the list whenever it comes to things that our ancestors our descendants might deplore about us. So it's something that we recognize, a lot of us recognize as a huge issue, but it's not exactly clear how do we solve it as a society. More compelling to some people is the fate of future animals. So if this sort of treatment continues in the long term, as countries like India and China are developing, they have rapidly increasing animal product consumption right now. They're adopting our American diets, unfortunately. And if that continues, and especially as humanity grows even beyond that, if we continue abusing animals, it could be even larger than it is now, which is very unfortunate. People also consider the welfare of wild animals to be quite important. So just as the number of farmed animals, we talk about that one because it dwarfs the number of other animals used by humans. The number of wild animals dwarfs that number even. So it's not as clear what we can do about wild animal suffering, but it is clear that it's an important issue that we should think about. Other people also strongly oppose animal agriculture for other reasons, like its damage to public health, damage to the environment, and to the economy. So things like the amount spent on farm subsidies, things like the caloric difference whenever you go from plant food to animal-based food. It's something like a 9-to-1 calorie conversion, so that's like throwing 90% of your food out every time you eat animal products, which is not a good way to feed the world, given how many people still suffer.
I had an idea yesterday for some shorts content for just going into places that don't have vegan options, asking, do you have vegan options, them saying no, and then leaving. Nice little neat short, wouldn't it? Get that going, get some more places to get vegan options on the menu. And the ultimate version would be going with a massive party, going in with like 25 people. Everyone sits down, everyone's rustling chairs, getting their cutlery, looking at the menus. Excuse me, do you have any vegan options? No, we don't. Then everyone leaves. That'd be devastating for them.
Suffer from hunger. But I think the animal case is extremely compelling on its own, so I won't talk too much about the other ones, but I recognize them as important, and I can talk about them more later if anyone's interested. Second part of the framework, we have neglectedness. Of course, as Ajay alluded to, the vast majority of domestic animals are farmed, and they receive only a small portion of those donations. Most of it is going to things like animal shelters, which, although very worthy causes, don't represent.
Hey, Tufty, welcome. Yeah, true. Annoyingly, I thought about doing some phone call content, but annoyingly, you're not allowed to. It's technically illegal to broadcast or to even record calls without telling the person, I guess. So yeah, phone stuff is out the. I thought about ringing up slaughterhouses and having them describe what happens. Say, I've got some concerns. I'm not really sure if this is ethical. I'd like you to tell me about it, and just seeing how they word things. I know that's something that varies state to state in America, whether you're allowed to record things without, or I guess whether you're allowed to record phone calls without consent, right? So some of the Americans could do that joke, maybe, depending where the laws are, where you are. Phoning up slaughterhouses, I think that could be some pretty good content to see how they kind of try and word it. Oh yeah, true, Tufty. Yeah, you can definitely do it privately.
Present most of the animals suffering at human hands. And even this bubble, even the 3% figure that Ajaya gave, most recently I saw that was for animals and the environment. So animals are even receiving just a portion of that.
Yeah, but you should start by saying, I would like to make a booking for 30 people, please. Oh, by the way, do you have vegan options? Never mind then.
And given their numbers, it's very something we should work on. Tractability. So this is an example of social change for different movements that's occurred over the past couple centuries.
What? That's mental, Jake. Fuck that.
And we've seen really rapid social change happen. It's not entirely clear, and it might never be, how much of this has been from activism as compared to other things like technological change or broader political shifts. But as we've seen with things like interracial marriage, prohibition, women's suffrage, change can happen very quickly. And there have been, activist movements associated right before these changes happen, which is correlational, not very strong evidence, but it shows that there's at least, some chance that activists have been causing these things. Additionally, we have evidence from, psychology, sociology, marketing that shows that we can influence both individual behavior and attitudes as well as social trends, so things like getting new products on the market and stuff like that.
Wow, this is crazy. See how sharp some of these are? The end point, I guess, is when the federal law is made, with the little circle there, and then this is the number of states passing the relevant rule. They're just at the start of the progress. Well, this talks in 2016, just when there was 4 states that had legalized recreational marijuana. I wonder how quickly that will go up. I feel that sometimes there's a bit of an overabundance with caution of interpreting evidence sometimes. Like, if you have activists, like some activism about abortion here, and then it precedes a massive amount of states making it legal, and then suddenly it's legal federally, like within a few years. I think it's a pretty tough-nosed critic who says, well, that's early correlation, you don't really know if that's caused by the activism. Like, I don't know, at some point you've got to give it to him, haven't you?
And then we've also had evidence in animal advocacy itself showing how much change that we've already created that really shows that we can make progress on the problem. All that being said, I do think this is the weakest of these 3 areas for animal advocacy, mainly because I think it's just very hard to tease out causation from correlational evidence, compared to something like anti-malarial nets or other things in global poverty, where you can run an RCT and be pretty confident that it was your intervention that was making the change. As an additional perspective, we can look quantitatively at the cause. So this is one of the most compelling figures to me that I actually prepared to give talks, because it's not the one that we use usually, but just whenever I saw this, even though I've been working in this field so long, it still kind of blew my mind. 12 to 25 years of factory farm suffering spared per dollar. And this is an example from corporate outreach, which is where you try and convince companies to adopt new welfare policies. So I selected that because it's the most robustly evidenced area of animal advocacy. It's probably, many people think it's not the highest and expected value, but that's a huge number, and that's the conservative estimate. That's how much we can be confident in from the easy to measure approach. So 12 to 25 years, that's decades for every dollar. I think that's absolutely insane and just hugely compelling. If we consider, cascading impact, that other companies will be more likely to adopt corporate changes. If we extend our time frame for how long into the future we're looking, this increases, of course.
Yeah, that is mental. You can prevent, well, this is 2016, I guess the numbers have updated a little bit, but he's talking about corporate campaigns here. 25 years of suffering on a factory farm for $1. I'm 33 years old. Imagine $1 being the difference between me having been on a factory farm or not since the age of 8. The value for money is mental here. I think the animal charity donations that I do are probably the best value for money that I spend. I don't get that kind of value on anything else. I paid £21 to get the train to Swindon the other day. That could have been centuries of suffering prevented. The value for money here is insane. I really think, I don't know how anyone doesn't find this everyone doesn't find this extremely compelling. There's so much suffering to be prevented for such a small amount of money.
So yeah, really compelling in my opinion. And compelling to other people as well, I suppose. So to talk about the evidence that we have that we can use to discuss animal advocacy as an entire cause area, but also talk about which changes we should seek to make within that area, what interventions we should use, what programs we should run, what charities we should donate to or work for. I think these are the main 4 categories. To explain them a bit, direct observation is things like corporate outreach. So in corporate outreach, we can see this group has been working with this company to make this welfare change. The company then said, all right, group, we've worked with you and you've convinced us, you've applied enough public pressure, you have convinced us that from a business perspective, it's not bad for our bottom line, especially given the consumer demand for these higher welfare products. And they say, all right, we're going to make this change. And we've seen examples where there's been maybe a consumer pressure to do that. So like companies that use eggs, for example, and there's been a big campaign to eliminate battery cages in the US for egg-laying hens, which are just similar to those gestation crates, very small cages for them. And we've seen companies that weren't campaigned against just make no changes. They fly under the radar. They don't have a big public pressure against them. And it's not until a organization talks to them that they actually do implement it. So direct observation seems like a very strong form of evidence. Also strong is direct experimentation. So if we were able to run those RCTs, we can do this to some extent, maybe with something like an online advertisement where we can, A/B test, give one person the animal advocacy intervention, give another person a control intervention and tell the difference. But they're still very limited and we don't have many right now. So they don't account for long-term outcomes. They don't account for how people talk about that with other people, which then generates discussion and potentially more change. And as I'll talk about in a bit, social effects are hugely important for any sort of large-scale behavior change you want to create. Similarly, we don't have much evidence right now for history and case studies, not because they don't exist, but because the research is very, very young in that area. My organization, Animal Charity Evaluators, has been trying to look into this. So we've done case studies of social movements, looking at what tactics they used, which ones worked, which ones didn't work. For example.
Yes, correct reaction, Tufty. Thank you. Yes, it is insane, right? So what it is, that is calculated from the money that has been spent on cage-free campaigns divided by the number of chickens. Typically, we're talking about chickens, or the amount of chicken years, I guess, affected by those campaigns. So in Europe, it's I think it was like 30 million US dollars equivalent had been spent on cage-free campaigns, and that had successfully prevented some amount more than that, millions of chickens being in factory farms by these corporate campaigns. There's also some sort of multiplier. So that is not directly fewer animals being farmed overall. So there's some sort of multiplier for X amount of improvement in their conditions, and how many times that would count towards saving one life, which is, I guess, a little bit complicated, basically. But another part of that I always like to talk about, these welfare increases are also increasing the price of farming these animals, and therefore fewer animals are farmed as a result of that. So yeah, there's a Rethink Priorities paper that talks about this. Rethink. I was talking about this just this morning. Corporate campaigns affect 9 to 120 years of chicken life per dollar spent. And here you go. Here's the numbers. Chickens, they should be affected by commitments every year. broiler welfare campaigns, cage-free campaigns. Okay, this is combined. So on average, 1.1 billion chickens per year. And then the costs of that, $84 million on average. And then this is chickens affected times follow-through rate. So there's some less than one multiplier as to how many people actually follow through, times mean years of impact divided by costs. 64. Oh, and this is the 9 to 120, right? Cage-free campaigns. So yeah, huge number of animals able to be affected per dollar, right? That's crazy. Average 41. Oh, I guess this is the 9 to 120. Yeah, on average 41 chicken years affected per dollar. So that'd be me having spent all of my life and then another 8 years from now on a factory farm or not. So yeah, extremely good value for money. Go check out Animal Charity Evaluators if you want to know the best places doing this stuff currently. I'll put the link to this in chat. I'm really pleased when people are discovering this stuff through my stream. A lot of people here already work on effective animal donations. But yeah, I always like it when I see people encountering this stuff for the first time. It really is as drastic as we're saying it is in terms of the value for money here from giving to these charities. This is why the Giving More part of Vegan 2.0 is such an important part.
For example, one of ours right now is on...
Yeah, good question, Tristan. I'm not sure why GFI are no longer on the Animal Charity Evaluators list. I guess that they have changed their methodology and their criteria for evaluating charities. They kind of improve it over time. So that could have an effect. I don't think there are any alt protein organizations on there at the moment. Good Food Fund, maybe a little bit. DVF as well, I think, also do some alt protein stuff. But yeah, GFI used to be on here. Good Food Institute, definitely a good one to give to. They'll be amongst the sort of best of the rest, I'm sure, evaluated charities. Yeah, so here are some that made it to the stage before getting recommended by Animal Charity Evaluators. China Vegan Society, there's Fauna-Lytics, again narrowly missed out this year, having been recommended for the 10 years previous to that. I'm actually not seeing Good Food Institute on here. But yeah, I don't know why they're not on there anymore. They are a pretty good, high leverage, high impact charity, from what I've seen. ProVeg, we know ProVeg. New Roots Institute. We've spoken to people from some of these organizations on the channel. But yeah, Animal Charity Evaluators. Tufter, you got to check it out. This is crazy value for money compared to, and crazy leverage for helping lots of animals compared to like simply being vegan. Right, here's my estimates on this topic. This is if you're omnivore, eating about 146 animals per year, fewer of you flexitarian, pescatarian, vegetarian, and saying that vegan is zero. The other side of that equation, here's if you give £20 a week, to effective animal organizations. And I think doing all of these things, so persuading others by posting on social media, taking part in the Fast Action Network and other organized activism, and then giving a modest amount of money to vegan charities or to effective animal charities, you can get, I think it's 54 times the number of animals helped than simply by being vegan alone. And of course, if you give more than that, right, the sky's the limit in terms of how many animals that you can help this way. There are some people who take high-paying jobs. Go check out my interview with Felix Verdeman for a guy who's like a high-paid business consultant and gives a ton of money to animal charities and is just killing it, helping hundreds of thousands of animals. one guy, right? So yeah, there's some really inspirational people I've spoken to, and yeah, check out Animal Charity Evaluators if you want to know where to start with effective giving. You can start small. Again, like giving, that was £20 a week, so it's going to be like $100 a month. And you're looking at, dozens of times more animals than you're helping by being vegan. Do you think this is just a money thing? If enough people gave enough money, we'd stop exploiting animals? Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. There's, very resource-constrained animal movement. And effectively infinite stuff that we could be spending money on to help animals. By just being vegan, what I call vegan 1.0, you're withholding your support for these industries. But as you're giving to effective animal charities, you're actually sticking it to these industries, right? And actually fighting against them and actually proactively helping animals, compared to the case where you didn't exist, right? So like the ultimate vegan 1.0 is just eating nothing. And some people have this attitude of like, it's just about reducing my exploitation, and the ultimate thing would be to get to zero. And really the best case would be if I was dead. That'd be ideal. Some people think, right, if you're in the vegan 1.0 mindset. But there's so much that you can do whilst being very much alive that is going to proactively help many times more animals. So I think a lot of vegans get into almost like a depressive spiral, where if you're playing the game where you're just trying to tread as lightly as possible and go through life not hurting any animals, and that's like the limit of your objective, is not that helpful for animals. It's not proactively helping any animals. And there's stuff that we can do in terms of giving more, sharing more, and doing more to actually be proactively helping animals. There's the Fast Action Network, which is here. I'll put the link again in chat, which I know some people are hot on. There's Animal Charity Evaluators for your giving, and then really sharing as much as you can pro-animal content and vegan 2.0 content as well, to help spread veganism and vegan 2.0. Yeah, there's a lot that we can do. Definitely interested in finding the best place to donate to, but I need a bit more convincing they're actually making a difference when you look at the rising number of animals exploited. Yeah, so I hear that, Tufty. So there's more animals on factory farms than ever before, right? So how can it be that but these organizations are so cost effective at taking animals off factory farms and helping animals on factory farms, right? I would just say, if it were not for the 10 years of effective animal advocacy since JC gave this talk in 2016, there would be even more. Right, so maybe it's gone from here to here in the intervening 10 years, but if it weren't for effective animal advocacy, it would have gone from here to here. Right, so it's you got to think about the counterfactuals. Us vegans are only a very small percentage of humanity. We really think they're changed just by donations? Yeah, absolutely. The farmed animal advocacy movement we have about $300 million a year total budget for advocating for farmed animals. If all of the vegans just in the UK, which has, I think, about 1/6 of the population of the US, if all of the vegans in the UK were to give £15 a month, that's about $20, to effective animal charities, would more than double the total resources for the movement. So this is super high leverage. This is main thing that I talk about on the channel. What makes you think that, Rebecca? I think a lot of these organizations kind of put in certainly more work than I would care to, in terms of or not more work than I would care to, but more work than I have into calculating these things. There's definitely very good value opportunities for helping animals for a very modest amount of money. And yeah, I mean, I think it's unsurprising as well, because it's going to be quite neglected. Like, most people are not vegans, most people wouldn't get excited about this kind of stuff, and so it makes sense that there's a lot of very good value opportunities that exist, because there aren't that many people interested in taking those opportunities. The idea is that we would take the best value opportunities to help animals first, and as a result, we would, eventually you get to less and less effective things. Like in global health, I think saving a life of a human, the cheapest way of doing that now is like, I think about $2,000 to $3,000. And that's because a lot of people care about that, like ending global hunger and malaria nets and stuff like this. And so those very good value for money opportunities get taken up quite quickly. And so you're left with less effective interventions. And so the cost of saving a human life is estimated about $2,000 to $3,000. Whereas the cost of saving farmed animals, I have it about 4 animals to the dollar. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true in general of charities, Rebecca. It is. I was speaking about this the other day, how charities' outcomes are disconnected from their funding in a way that it's certainly possible for charities to achieve not very much and still have quite compelling fundraising materials. And that's why things like animal charity evaluators are very important, because they're going to do some evaluation of what are the most effective charities, the most effective interventions, and then produce these rankings, which again, there's dozens of smart people whose full-time job it is to produce these assessments. And then they'll identify charities that can be extremely cost-effective for helping animals. So yeah, that's why I think charity evaluators are very, very important, because by default, average charities, as we were just seeing on that LinkedIn post, their impact is going to be way lower. At the very least, what's the harm in chucking $20 a month towards animal charity evaluators? Right, worst case is not really doing anything if you're very, very skeptical. But if the researchers on this topic are right, and there is up to 120 years of chicken life per dollar to be spared here, why take the risk of not giving to them, right?
The Welsh language movement, so trying to get Welsh as an established language in Wales. And they actually had an interesting example where that movement was achieving huge success.
Well, take a look, Tufty, at animal charity evaluators and the kinds of interventions that these organizations are doing. They have very, very modest budgets. And so, honestly, one person giving regularly to these will make a big difference to their overall budgets. And then they're doing very cost-effective things where some of these are hundreds. I think it was Vegetarian Brazilian Society. They estimate hundreds of animals, hundreds of meals per dollar affected through their campaigning. And I mean, it's not that surprising that these opportunities exist. Why would we think that it would not be the case that funding these charities would be helping a lot of animals? Can you tell me what the difference is and how it's acted out in reality? Yeah, we'll go take a look at the recommended charities page on Animal Charity Evaluators. You can read more about what they actually do. Basically, there's a few very high leverage things. One is policy, corporate and government outreach, right? And then there's also movement building, so bringing more people and funders into the animal movement. What else we got here? Alternative proteins is one that, improving cell cultivated meat and plant-based meat alternatives. Institutional interventions is a big one, trying to get big institutions to adopt plant-based defaults, for example. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's an incentive for particular charities to do that, Rebecca, but I don't think on average, like animal charity evaluators are not doing that. Right, they're making evaluations between different charities and trading them off and saying this is more cost effective than that. So I think individual charities might be incentivized to exaggerate their impact, and that's why it's important to have a third party that can evaluate and say, you know, this is going to be more effective than that, and so on. Yeah, look, there's an unwarranted level of skepticism here. Okay, there are organizations that can help a lot of animals for a modest amount of resources, and it's just the case that, like, we always talk about the meat industry lobbyists. You could go and take a comparable level of skepticism there and say, oh, how do you know this lobbying is actually doing anything, right? It's just the case that paying professionals to work to improve outcomes for animals is likely to be a helpful thing to do. If you can think of any kind of intervention that you could do to help animals, it makes sense that doing this in the context of a professional organization would be the way to go. If they found that the impact of the charities was 1,000% lower when there is less money. Well, it's a competition between the charities, right? So they're going to recommend the most cost-effective ones. But actually, I don't think that's even the case, because we speak about scale insensitivity and how people are, don't really adjust their evaluations to large numbers in the way that they ought to. Like the estimate in this case is 120 years, up to 120 years of chicken life per dollar spent. I don't think that they'd get 100 times the donations if they said it was 12,000 years. I think people would just be insensitive at that scale. But yeah, the point is, there's an amount of money that's been spent on these things. There's pretty good evidence of them having an impact, which again we're talking about in this video here. But yeah, animal charity evaluators, go check them out. There's a lot to be done there. Yeah, well, I mean, have a read about it, Tufty, and have a look at some of my videos on the topic.
Yes, but then a similar movement for a similar type of language being revived in a sense was a failure and didn't really make any changes. So we have an intern right now who's actually finalizing her project, comparing those two and saying, well, what did they do that works compared to what happened for the other one not to work. Of course, the issue with that is very low sample size. We're trying to tease out causation from correlation usually. So it's weaker evidence, but it's evidence nonetheless. And then this is a rather weak form of evidence, but we have a lot of it. And I'll talk about that one in the next slide. So the two that I think we're using right now mostly are direct observation and general psychology and sociology. So an example of that fourth one is this experiment, which was done unrelated to animals, but about hotel towels. So it's a kind of famous one about an interesting quirk in human behavior. They gave people two messages to try and get them to reuse their towels in the hotel. This helps the environment. You have to use less time washing it. It helps the hotel because they have to have less labor, have less energy spending, all those sorts of things. And they gave people a message about environmentalism, which is just, it has a huge environmental impact. And then they gave one about lots of other people are doing it. Some high percentage, I think it was in the 70s, of people are reusing their towels. And from a logical perspective, it should be just, environmental is compelling. That's the reason we should be making these changes. But as many of you would guess, it was much more impactful to use the social message compared to the environmental one.
Well, I could ask you guys, what do you think would be cost-effective ways to help animals? What do you think would be good charitable causes to support if your goal is to help as many animals as possible? I'm all ears for alternatives.
Even went further and compared the social message of talking about guests at the hotel generally to guests who just stayed in your room, which shouldn't make a difference, right? But it even had more of an impact when the guests were in your room that they were talking about. It bumped up to something like 50%. So that's the sort of evidence that we can use. The way this might inform us is to say, well, in our messaging, so when we're designing a leaflet or something, we should talk about the social effects, talk about how many other people are making changes to their diets, shopping for better products, eating more plant-based foods. It could also indicate that we should aim for social interventions that create peer support between people. So for example, getting a news story instead of just having a one-on-one conversation with an individual, because a news story generates conversation, it generates peer attitude change, which could be really compelling. And of course, this is just one study. I don't mean to say that this study itself is very strong evidence for anything, but the fact that social pressure is very, very important has been established in many studies. So now I want to talk about the different methods people are using to reduce the suffering of farmed animals, and also touch on wild animals. So welfare improvements are what I've alluded to before, and their pros, I think, are that they're particularly robust. We can be pretty confident that these changes are happening as a result of donor dollars or of labor hours. And for lots of people, that's very important. They think things that have weak evidence tend to not be very impactful, so you really need strong evidence to pull you away from that prior belief that you come into the situation with. I don't find that as convincing. I'm pretty okay with speculative things and kind of just care about pure expected value in a sense. But I still think welfare improvements are very promising. One of the reasons is that they create common knowledge. So when we're talking about the social effects, this is knowledge that I have and that you have, but also that I know that you have and you know that I know that you have.
Yeah, I think that's probably better than not spreading the word about scientism and veganism. Yeah, but I mean, I don't have a reason to think that that's a particularly cost-effective way of helping animals. I mean, it's going to cost a lot of money to have someone standing in the street all day and talking to individuals. It would make sense to me that if I have the option to pay some professional lobbyists to persuade the NHS to offer plant-based meals by default, that's going to impact way more meals per dollar than paying someone to stand in the street and talk to individuals and try and get them to go vegan. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, and I have a lot of respect for the people who do that kind of street activism, but it's going to be a small number of animals affected in even one person's life of work doing that, compared to like corporate campaigns, for example. The institutional stuff, I think it makes sense that is where the value is. Well, sure it does, Tufty. If they have plant-based meals by default, then there's going to be way fewer meat meals selected, and therefore there's going to be way fewer animals killed for food, right? And it might be, one person doing that can affect many, many thousands or millions of meals compared to the person standing in the street and talking to individuals. Again, I don't think there's a bad thing to do, anything that's like targeting individuals, but there's a reason that that isn't done as a form of marketing, right? Well, that's why I said default stuff. I'm getting one guide here. That's why I said defaults, right? You offer the plant-based meals as the default, and then that increases the proportion of people choosing the plant-based meal from, say, 10% to 30%, or we've estimated 30 percentage points, so say 10% to 40% of people choosing plant-based meals, times, like, let's say 10 million meals served by the NHS per year, right? It's going to be 3 million meals affected if you can successfully get that default implemented. Now, how many individuals is it going to take to make up that number of meals? Nah, you're good. I'm just kidding with you. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think that the street activism is a bad thing. I don't think the individual activism is a bad thing, but it's got to be about effectiveness, right? Because again, we've got very limited resources here. So, like, if I was going to give you $300 million and you can spend this how you like to go and try and help animals, you'd want to be looking for the most cost-effective ways of doing it. So yeah, again, I think it's a good thing for people to do the street activism and be persuading on an individual level. I mean, even in my Vegan 2.0 estimates, like, that's the most modest changes that we can make, right? Convincing one person per year to go vegan is going to be the same as the difference between this and this. Doing your activism is going to be about 10x as many animals, and doing the charitable donations, the very modest amount of charitable donations, by the way, it's going to be about 40x as many animals. Now, let's say that I'm exaggerating this by 10 times, or Animal Charity Evaluators exaggerating this by 10 times. and there's not, there's way fewer animals helped, it's still going to be 4 times more impactful than per individual persuaded, right? So yeah, I mean, again, like, I'm largely appealing to evidence by people who have spent way more time on this than I have. So I'd take a look at some of these and some of the stuff that I've done on the channel about this. Anyway, I better speed through this. I got to go out in a little bit.
And Adam.
Hey, little sunshine. Good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome back. Sorry you just got here. I've got to go out very shortly, but we'll finish up this video. Yes, it has been a good conversation. It has been a good conversation.
Infinitum. And this is something that can engender conversation. It can get people feeling that peer pressure that makes them change their attitudes and behaviors. And these create animal-friendly precedents in society. So
yeah, I hear you, Tufty. That's a very reasonable thing. Yeah, go check out the Animal Charity Evaluators website. And you can find their evidence and reasoning for their particular recommendations. I mean, here's the founder 10 years ago talking about like various strengths of evidence, and we've got some evidence that this works, and it's not very strong evidence. Like, personally, I'm a little bit more bullish with interpreting evidence than Jason will tend to be. So I would be quicker to be making claims about the effectiveness of some of these things than Animal Charity Evaluators would be. So I feel very safe in taking their reasoning and evidence personally.
They establish our society as one that's making substantive, concrete changes for these animals, which then establishes them as like people who are in our political, moral circles, people that we care about, people that are relevant to policymaking, which can then lead to further change down the road. So like the adoption of more plant-based foods. Which reduces a lot of suffering, because even if you have these welfare improvements, this is a cage-free facility. So if you hear about these cage-free reforms, they're going from battery cages, which are horrible, horrible places, to a situation like this where they're in a cage of other animals' flesh. And the research seems to indicate that this is an improvement for welfare, but it's not much, of course, in the scope of things. It could have potential negative effects, so it could increase complacency. It could devalue animals in a way. So some people have argued that social justice movements build on absolute terms. They say, we should demand nothing less than abolition. So abolition of, segregation, abolition of the denial of certain groups to be able to vote, things like that. And if we're making these like incremental changes, it might devalue animals and say, oh, well, they don't deserve true liberation or true abolition. They just deserve, slightly larger cages or, slightly more space to roam around in. And that could be a potential harm. Lots of people are pretty convinced by that. I'm somewhat convinced. Another one is undercover investigations. So these rely on indirect impact, which is sort of a negative, but they reach a ton of people. So you publicize this investigation that shows cruelty in a farm, and then people react to it by changing their diets maybe. Sometimes it's pretty clear that companies react by changing their welfare policies, which can be pretty impactful. So groups like Mercy for Animals, an investigator will gain employment at a farm and then take that footage with hidden cameras and then be able to talk about it, do a press conference like this one, and get news stories. So I think from that social perspective, this is really promising. It creates moral outrage in society about whatever happened. And there are general psychology findings that moral outrage and being actually deeply angry and unsettled like we get whenever we see the cruel treatment is a key part of overcoming system justification. System justification is just what it sounds like. It's our tendency to make up reasons to justify the status quo. So for those reasons, I think investigations.
I appreciate you being open-minded, Tufty. Thank you. And it's really awesome when people are discovering this stuff through my stream, so I appreciate that.
It can be really impactful. They seem to have less of a downside than welfare improvements, so they don't risk as much complacency or viewing these animals as lesser in some sense.
Yeah, you can stick some links in Discord or in chat if you can, Rebecca. I won't look at them now just because I don't have a lot of time, but maybe we can do a little spreadsheet stream later on or tomorrow. Nothing like a good spreadsheet to bring the viewers in, I tell you.
Undercover investigations have a lot of historical precedent. They've been used for oppressed groups of humans, and they don't at least directly indicate that things are getting better and that we should be complacent and we've done enough. They're pointing.
No, you're good, Rebecca. Honestly, it's important that we are critical about this stuff and demand a good level of evidence. So no, I appreciate you. I don't mean to be dismissive of your concerns at all.
Out the fact that there is still lots of cruelty going on. Next, we have the individual approach, which is grassroots outreach. So this is reaching an exceptionally large number of people for very low cost. So we have things like leaflets, things like online ads, where you can reach people for just pennies on the dollar. And even if just a...
Oh, here you go. There you go, Tufty. Here's your proverbial man on the street. Well, maybe I'll eat my words on that then.
A fraction of a percentage of those people actually change their behaviors, that still, can be a whole lot of change in terms of number of animals spared. For example, if you're getting them to go vegetarian or even just reduce their consumption of animal products. The con of this is that it does rely on our ability to change individual attitudes and behavior with a short interaction, which is something some people are skeptical of. So you might say you can't even get that fraction of a percent because all you're doing is showing them an ad. In order for them to make a substantive change, like to change their diet, at least enough of them, you really need prolonged behavior. So you need a friend who's doing it. You need a news story that they can then talk about with their friends at work, and then have a conversation between 5 people who does it. So then you have the peer pressure for people to take action based on it and things like that. So I'm a little more optimistic about the systemic stuff myself, investigations and welfare reform. But I see this as definitely cost effective and definitely compared to human interventions to be really impactful.
Well, there you go. This was 10 years ago. I guess they were a little more open to this. I think now a lot of effective animal advocates, I believe it's largely the case that the thinking is there's way better evidence for the institutional level stuff. But good to know that this is on the cards. And yeah, I mean, again, it's going to be still pretty good value if you're paying even better value if you have volunteers, right? But let's say you're paying someone even minimum wage to do outreach like this. Just by the number of animals helped by each person changing their diet, you're still going to get like a decent number of animals per dollar.
Next, we have an interesting one, which is animal-free foods. This is something that's been getting a ton of press lately. So this is a meatball, of course, but it's not just any meatball. It's the world's first cultured one that came out earlier this year. So this is real cow cells, but no cow had to be killed for this. So you can make these with just a biopsy of a living animal and take those cells and then proliferate them in a facility similar to a laboratory, similar to the way certain things are done in medicine, the way they're growing these tissues, and this can create the same taste and texture. I mean, it's the exact, physically identical. So this has been called like excuse-free animal product alternatives, because even if you think that the vegan options, the plant-based options, are the same in taste and texture, you can still have excuses. You can still say, well, the origin, it's not the exact same molecules. It's not cells and animal cells, it's plant cells and things like that. But this takes away all the excuses. If you're going to want to, not eat cultured meat, then you essentially have to have some sort of justification, like I just, the past of what happened, or I just like animal cruelty, which is of course something nobody's going to say. So in that way, it could be really impactful. It could be a game changer. Of course, there's unclear technological roadblocks, unclear social roadblocks. So some people are weirded out by this. It's something that people think is unnatural, maybe in some sense. And it seems like we have potential to overcome that, but it's not clear how much of a roadblock it'll be. Open Philanthropy Project, which I'm sure many of you know about, is a major force in the effective altruism community, and they look broadly at different interventions. And they wrote a report on cultured meat that their opinion was that it was pretty far off technologically. So that means we could still have a lot of suffering before it comes, and we still need to do advocacy. My personal opinion is that technology moves along. There are business innovations for it. People wanting to do it for reasons other than purely altruistic reasons.
Yeah, I hear you on that, Sunshine. I mean, it's better than killing them, right? And the thing is that you can make thousands and thousands of tons from that one biopsy, so it's going to be saving millions of cows as a result. we were watching Mr. Beast at the Cultivated Meat Factory the other day, and they actually use cells from chicken eggs to make chicken. So they didn't even come from chicken in that case. But yeah, it's a way of dividing the number of animals used by millions, basically. And the other thing with the upside foods, with the chicken egg cells, they were using cells that were taken in 2018, I think they said. And they're still able to produce chicken meat from that now. So, although it's come from an animal at some point, and very purist vegans could say, you know, this doesn't count as vegan, the marginal number of animals per additional amount of chicken produced now really is zero. So yeah, for me, I would think that's okay. And I certainly think it's better than the alternative of like carrying on factory farming chickens, right? But yeah, I hear you. It's yeah. Well, careful, Sunshine. We're getting on so well. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very supportive of the cultivated meat and the plant-based meat. Well, let's talk about cultivated meat, right? I think it's a classic example of it's like a trolley problem-esque scenario, right? Where you can biopsy the cow on one track or slaughter millions of them on the other track. It's gonna be a pretty good trade in my mind.
And technology never backslides except for in like really weird situations.
And again, of course, like the nice thing about this is as well, doesn't really matter if vegans want to eat it. So we. That's interesting, Rebecca. It doesn't really matter if vegans want to eat it, right? Because of course it's for non-vegans. It's displacing demand for meat from non-vegans. So it's kind of fine and maybe even good if vegans don't want to eat cultivated meat or don't care about cultivated meat or don't, are not interested in cultivated meat on some level. Yeah, that's fair enough, Sunshine. You be careful with that, all right? I'm just playing.
So it seems like technological progress will push forward, but it seems to me that we have a lot of uncertainty as to whether when better technologies develop, they'll be adopted successfully. So I think social facilitation of these products, things like what, there's a group called the Good Food Institute that's doing a lot of public promotion of these alternative animal products. That seems really impactful to me. But of course we have some people like, I'll call out Perumal.
True, Tufty. Yeah, that's it. That's my thinking. I mean, I probably would eat it, honestly. In fact, I have eaten cultivated meat. I've eaten cultivated beef, and I've eaten cultivated fish. And yeah, I'm like, when it comes to market, if it's zero marginal animals used, then I'm up for it. I wrote a piece about this in the Vegan Society magazine a little while ago, opposite a sociologist vegan who was arguing against cultivated meat, and I was arguing for cultivated meat. So it's definitely like different vegan views on it, but yeah, ultimately it's going to matter for what meat eaters think in terms of the market.
Who is working for, or he founded Moofree. They're doing cultured milk, which is probably technologically easier than creating actual animal tissues, and that could alleviate a ton of suffering by having this.
Moofree was the original name of the company, which is now called Perfect Day, and they now have products on the market. They have cow-free dairy ice cream that is called Brave Robot. Anyone come across this at all? I think it's only in the States. Yeah, so this is dairy ice cream, animal-free dairy, right? From, I believe it's genetically modified yeast, which produces, yeast-produced molecules. There's no lactose, but does include yeast-produced molecules reproducing those found in milk. What is the thing if it's not lactose? Whey protein, yeah. So they can make whey protein without any animals now. That's pretty cool, eh?
Analog that is indistinguishable from the animal products themselves.
I appreciate you, Sunshine. Good, you're in the right place.
Next, we have research. This is what I do. So this is an example of some of the basic research we've done. Really straightforward conclusions, but really impactful. There's a difference in cost effectiveness between an animal shelter and an ACE recommended organization in terms of animal.
Yeah, here's the cost effectiveness stuff. They don't have this graph anymore. I've looked for, I don't think this is any longer on the Animal Charity Evaluators website. Again, this is 10 years ago, so kind of fair enough that they've updated it. But at that time, they were estimating for a $1,000 donation, 4,769 animals saved. So it's pretty close to my estimate today of 4-ish animals per dollar. It's basically on the same lines, right? Here I've got 3.8, and here I've got 4.4. And here they've got, what would it be, 4.7 animals per dollar. So yeah, it's really, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Saved or animals spared. And the difference is huge. You can do this calculation in many different ways, but it shows that there's a really big difference, which can then help donors move their money towards ACE recommended organizations on the right instead of spending as much on those animal shelters on the left. Of course, this is because so much money is spent on these animal shelters and because it's difficult. It's not to say that they are, less morally worthy in some deep sense. It's just to say that on the margin, we can get more impact by our dollars given to ACE recommended organizations. Of course, current research is harder and deals with more difficult questions than this. So tackling things like, of those interventions that I've just showed you, which ones should we be sending marginal funding to? Things like, how do we actually create messaging that will ensure people adopt animal product alternatives like sophisticated plant-based products and cultured meat? I think the value of research as to whether we should spend our marginal resources is very up in the air right now. I think there's a very limited amount of research going on in animal advocacy, which indicates that there's potentially low-hanging fruit, and we should at least investigate it. So right now there's $1 million being spent on the empirical, so object level animal advocacy research, doing like RCTs to see whether there actually is an impact on people's diets from those. And I think that project that's going on right now, it just started actually, will tell us a lot about the value of research and whether we should continue with it in the longer term. But it's where I'm spending my time right now, so obviously I think there's something in it. But we'll see, we'll find out whether it should receive more marginal donations in the long run. Finally, last thing I'll touch on is wild animal welfare. So as I mentioned, the scale of this is absolutely huge, but it has unclear tractability. It is very neglected, even among animal causes. So when we talk about the welfare of wild animals, this isn't just environmentalism and ensuring that these animals have their habitat to live in, but it's actually asking, are they living good lives? If you're a wild animal out there,
yeah, fair, Rebecca. Thanks for sharing. I might check that out at some point. Although I think it's all moved, the whole area has moved on so much in the last 10 years that it might not be that relevant anymore. But yeah.
You're not going to feel justified in like having some disease happen to you because it's like part of the circle of life. No, you don't want to be suffering from that, flesh-eating disease.
I think I remember reading that at the time, Harrison Nathan. I think I remember
that. Or you don't want to be a gazelle eaten by that lion. You don't care about the broader circle of life. But this is difficult because we have to consider the impact to all sorts of different creatures, including humans to some extent, and understand whether the changes we make will affect population sizes in a way that tips the ecosystem out of balance, such that there's more suffering, or a way that it increases the risk of global warming, which could be bad for humans and animals alike, and all those sorts of questions are really, really tough. So I think research and very basic advocacy, getting more people involved in this is impactful. I don't think in the immediate future we're going to be doing any macro interventions to really make changes. So that's the last area, and I just want to talk briefly about how you can help. So of course, donations to ACE's top charities I think are hugely impactful. I mean, we chose those charities because they'd be the most impactful. You can go on our website and find them, and I'm also happy to answer questions about them. You can work for animal advocacy organizations. That includes our top charities, but also other ones that you feel really compelled by, or things where you have a comparative advantage in. So if you're, have a particular skill in law, for example, then a group like the Non-Human Rights Project that's trying to establish legal personhood and the ability for animals to have more of a legal presence and actually file suit in court could be just the thing for you. There's an interesting opportunity for being an undercover investigator. That is hard, and I don't think it's particularly suited for many people, but if anyone's really interested in it, I'd love to talk to you about it. It involves, grueling work. You have to work at a farm, essentially, and, maybe do things that are participating in the violence that you're opposed to. But then you capture footage from those, you help support the press conferences like you saw, you help get more coverage of this, and even more than that, it builds you a public platform that you can use to then advocate for further changes on behalf of animals. This is actually something I consider really seriously, but I've decided to do other things, but I still think it's definitely a top tier choice. And I'd love to see someone who's maybe just out of college or something like that start down this path if they think they can do it, and use that as a public platform to advocate. You can also join me in research. So this is interesting because you can do it on a very short-term basis, and it can be really impactful. So even just like blog posts that people can do about a particular social movement, maybe one that you've been involved in or one that you just have a particular interest in, can be really informative to then sweep into our big bucket of evidence and be able to make more macro decisions. Excuse me. So like I told you about the language one that's going on right now, and although it's being done by an ACE intern, I think you can do those outside of ACE, or you could be an ACE intern and do those. And then the most important one I think is volunteering, and not in a professional capacity, but just spreading the word. Be a conduit. I think this is hugely impactful.
Oh damn! Looks like it was clapped off there before he was fully done. But good to see. Good to see. That's JC Rees a good 10 years ago now. Wow. I think it looks like it's going to be worth watching more of these kind of talks. It's educational content for me, and hopefully for all of you guys as well. I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'm going to try to stream the panel that I'm doing tonight. So there's a very good chance I'll be firing up another stream in a couple of hours. So look out for that. And yeah, thank you guys for joining me this afternoon. I appreciate you guys watching. We've learned together. We've played together. We've advocated together. We've given together. All right. Well, I'll see you guys in a couple of hours if you're able to join the stream to watch the panel, if I'm able to get it going. Yeah, I agree, Sunshine. The undercover investigators are made of sterner stuff than I am. Yeah, certain type of person that can stomach that. But yeah, they'll have my respect. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching, and yeah, if you can, look out for my stream in a couple of hours, because I'll be on this panel this evening talking about cultivated meats. So take care guys, nice talking to you this afternoon, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.